Deep within the archives of history lies a forgotten symbol, an insignia whispered about in fearful tones. Signa maledictus. This cursed mark is said to bring doom to all who bear it, a silent harbinger of inescapable horror. When a historian named Daniel Carter discovers an ancient manuscript detailing the Signa, he unwittingly invites a sinister force into his life, unraveling a nightmarish sequence of events. Daniel had always been obsessed with lost knowledge, relics that time and fear had buried. His latest discovery was no different. An aged, leather-bound book locked within the depths of an abandoned monastery's library. The pages, brittle and stained with age, bore the scrawled warnings of past readers, each more frantic than the last. Yet, the symbol at the heart of the text called to him, its curves and markings strangely familiar, as if it had always been waiting for him. Daniel sat in his dimly lit study, tracing his fingers over the faded ink of the manuscript. The Signa Maledictus had appeared throughout history, attached to inexplicable tragedies. Towns wiped out by plagues, entire bloodlines extinguished, lone survivors whispering of an unseen force before succumbing to insanity. The symbol was always there, hidden in the margins of history like a malignant shadow. As he deciphered the text, Daniel felt an odd pressure in the room, as though unseen eyes watched from the dark corners. He dismissed the sensation as paranoia, convincing himself that his mind was simply playing tricks after long hours of study. But in the depths of the night, the whispers began, a rustling, unintelligible murmur that seemed to seep from the very walls of his home. It started small. Books slid off shelves without explanation. His reflection in the mirror lingered a second too long before mimicking his movements. At first, Daniel reasoned it away. Coincidences, exhaustion. But then came the voices. They were faint at first, murmurs in languages he could not understand. But with each passing night, they grew clearer, closer. On the third night, Daniel woke to the sound of his own name. His blood ran cold as he turned towards the source. The darkness in the corner of his room was deeper than it should have been, an abyss that swallowed the weak glow of his bedside lamp. A shape moved within it, shifting, observing. Then, as quickly as it appeared, it vanished. The morning light brought no comfort. As Daniel washed his face, his eyes caught something on his wrist, a dark, intricate marking that had not been there before. The realization sent a jolt of panic through him. He scrubbed at it furiously, but the mark remained, burned into his flesh like a brand. He spent the day buried in research, flipping frantically through books, desperate for an explanation. The more he read, the more dread settled in his chest. The mark was not just a symbol, it was a seal, a tether linking him to an ancient and malevolent force. And once marked, there was no escape. The phenomena escalated. Shadows twisted unnaturally in his periphery, growing closer, bolder. His own reflection began to distort, grinning when he was expressionless, whispering when he remained silent. The air in his home thickened with an oppressive presence, pressing against his chest like unseen hands. Desperate, he sought out Evelyn Blackwood, a known expert in the occult. When she saw the mark on his wrist, her face drained of color. "You shouldn't have found it," she whispered. "You need to listen to me. There is only one way to end this." Evelyn explained the origins of the Signa. It had been carved into existence by a dying sorcerer, an execution gone wrong centuries ago. Wrongfully accused, the sorcerer had cursed his captors with his final breath, marking them and their descendants for generations. The curse had spread through time, infecting those who dared to seek its meaning. Evelyn showed Daniel records of others who had borne the mark. They all met the same fate: violent deaths, inexplicable madness, disappearances. None had survived. Determined to break the curse, they attempted an exorcism. Candles flickered violently as Evelyn chanted ancient words, her voice trembling. The shadows resisted, clawing at the edges of the light. Then, a guttural voice filled the room. "He is ours. You cannot unmake what has been written." The ritual failed. The Signa burned hotter against Daniel's skin, his veins darkening as though ink were spreading through his body. The entity had grown stronger. Sleep became a luxury Daniel could no longer afford. The whispers never ceased. His dreams were plagued with twisted visions, his own corpse speaking to him, warning him of an end he could not avoid. He saw the faces of past victims, their hollow eyes pleading for release. The real world blurred with hallucinations. He saw figures watching him from the corners of rooms, felt unseen hands tracing his skin, cold and cruel. The mark throbbed, feeding on his fear. Evelyn discovered an ancient passage hidden in a forgotten tome. There was one way to survive. The curse could be transferred. Someone had to willingly take the Signa upon themselves. The thought repulsed Daniel, but the alternative was worse. He was running out of time. The entity grew impatient. One night it finally emerged, a shifting, nightmarish figure standing at the foot of his bed. It whispered of hunger, of eternity. Daniel realized that his choice was no longer his own. He had to act. A stranger knocked on his door the next evening, a curious researcher drawn to Daniel's work. Their conversation led to the manuscript, to the Signa. As the researcher touched the pages, Daniel felt a weight lift from his soul. The mark faded from his wrist. The stranger gasped in pain. Daniel packed his belongings and fled, leaving behind the cursed manuscript. He convinced himself that he had done what was necessary, that survival required sacrifice. But deep down, guilt gnawed at him. Days later, a new scholar sat in Daniel's abandoned study, poring over the journal he had left behind. The room grew colder, the shadows lengthened, and on his wrist a mark began to form. The cursed Signa had found its next host. The cycle would never end.